welcome back to another video, and in this video we're going to be continuing on with our tutorials on macOS development with AppKit, and in this particular video we are going to be taking a look at how we can do a couple different things in AppKit, but ultimately what the end result is going to be is it's going to be a sidebar in macOS. Now, if you want to know what a sidebar should look like, look no further than Finder. In Finder, we have that sidebar with a translucent appearance, and all the different rows and all of that stuff. That is a NSTableView. Like I mentioned when we first began covering NSTableViews, they are used in sidebars. Now, today we're going to take a look at how we can create one. So, let's kind of talk a little bit about what the different things we're going to learn along the way are. The first thing is we're going to learn how we can get rid of the column headers in our table. Because sometimes you want them, other times you don't. In the case of a sidebar, you do not want them. So we're going to learn how we can get rid of those table column headers. Then we are going to learn how we can apply a specific style to our table view to get that translucent sort of style for a sidebar. And then third, we are going to learn how we can, we're going to learn how it is that we can make our sidebar actually look like a sidebar that takes up the entire height of our window inside of an NSSplitViewController, because that is primarily what we use for sidebar and detail, master detail style interfaces like this. And then finally, we're going to learn how we can execute code when the selection changes in our table view. All right, so let's go ahead and get started by taking a look at how it is that we can remove the header view of our table view. Because if we look in the application that I have running here, you can see we have an NSSplitViewController, where on the right we have a detail VC, and then on the left we have our table with 6 movies inside of it. And we have a column header, which has the title of movie title, right? And we don't want that if we're going to use a sidebar. So let's go into Xcode and go into our sidebar controller that I've created here. It's a simple NSViewController subclass like we've had before. We have our NSTableView taking up the entire space, and that's just about it, really. We have our normal NSTableView configuration code using the delegate and data source and all of that. So the first thing that we need to do is get rid of the title for our column. So we can get rid of nameColumn.title. Now our column isn't going to have a title, but we're not quite done. The next thing we need is to actually remove the header view. And we can do this by setting our header view property to nil, because we don't want this to have a header view. So we can say table.headerView, and if we take a look at the inline documentation, you can see that this is an NSTable header view. And the inline documentation also says the documentation inline also says that this is the view that's used to draw the headers over columns. All right. Now, because this is optional, we can set it to nil like that. Now we don't have any headers. We can save this and take a look at what our app looks like now. So this is what our app looks like now. Both items take up half the screen. And then we have our table still there. We have one column and our data, but it doesn't quite look right yet. It doesn't look like a sidebar quite yet. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to apply the specific style to our table view to make it look translucent, to have that translucent appearance. And we do this by setting its style property to source list. So it'll look like a source list. Now, to do this, we can say table.style equals .source list, like that. And now when we run our code, just like that, now we can see a slight difference in our table view. It looks like the color is bleeding through, although to be honest, of course, the color isn't going to be as apparent as it would be if we had a lighter background behind it. But that is how we can make our table view look like a translucent list. And that's all we need to do right now in our source controller, or rather our sidebar controller, I should say. We will come back to it because we need to implement a delegate method to handle selection changes. But for now, we're going to save this. And inside of detail control, or not detail controller, inside of view controller, which is our NSSplitViewController subclass, where we have let sidebar equals NSSplitViewItem view controller sidebar controller, that line, we need to change the initializer that we're using. And the particular initializer that we need to use here is where the first parameter and only parameter is sidebar with view controller. Because we want this item to be a sidebar. And this does a few things. The first thing that it does is it makes sure that the sidebar item is smaller in size in terms of its width than the second item. And two, it makes sure that the list and the item take up the entire height of the window, like any other sidebar-based application on macOS is supposed to look like. So let's go ahead and change this initializer. Instead of view controller, it'll be sidebar with view controller, like that. Save that. And now, with that change, let's take a look at our application. And here is our application. Now you can see that our sidebar looks exactly how it's supposed to look, with the sidebar split view item taking up the entire height of our window, precisely how we intended. and our table is a translucent source list. The last thing we need to do is handle table row selections. We need to handle when those change. So let's go ahead and close this out. I'm going to go to Sidebar Controller again. And down here at the very bottom of our Sidebar Controller, I have a table view delegate method. I have the stub for it anyway. And this is selection did change. This will be sent to our table view telling it, hey, the user changed their selection. Execute some code now to respond to it. And so what we need to do is when the selection changes, we need to get the selected row of our table, and then we need to get the view controller that is inside of the next available split view item. In this case, it's just going to be the detail view controller, and just set any properties or call any methods that we need to call on that view controller in response to our selection change. So let's go ahead and do that. The first thing that we need to do is we need to say let selected row equals table dot selected row. And so now we have the selected row. Next, we need to retrieve the view controller for our detail controller, right? For our detail view controller from our NSSplitView item, but this is going to require that we access the parent of our sidebar controller. So we can do this by exactly the same way that we did in our NSSplitViewController video. If you haven't watched that, watch that first so you understand what's happening here, because I'm not going to go and explain every bit of what I'm about to do here. I explain it in that video, so if you haven't watched it, watch that first. So we can do a guard statement here with guard let parent equals self.parent as NSSplitViewController let item equals parent dot split view items well, actually, what we want is we'll say let detail VC equals parent dot split view items, and we want our second item, which is the detail view, dot view controller as detail controller, else we will return. Because there's no point in continuing if none of this or any of this is nil. If we reach this point, we know that we have our detail controller, so we can say detail VC dot movie title equals and we'll say movies should be selected row dot title. And we can say detail VC dot title label equals detail VC dot movie title, like that. Our label dot string value, I should say. There we go. Dot string value, like that. All right. And I'm going to force unwrap this because we know it has a value at this point. We'll save this and we can run our code now. Let's go into the table and let's say Star Wars Episode 1. Go into our detail view. And we should, if all went well, we're supposed to see the title of the movie. However, it appears that we do not. So let's go ahead and go into our detail controller and see what might be up with it. Alright, so we can jump to definition here. And let's take a look at what we have. Alright. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say select a movie like that as kind of its default. And we have that now. Let's run this again. All right, so there is our label. We can see select a movie. Let's select a table, or not table, select a movie. So we'll say Revenge of the Sith. And there it is. So now we have our labels appearing in our detail view every time we change the selection. All right, so that pretty much does it for this video, guys, on how we can remove the header view of our table, how we can change the style of our table to get translucent lists in the source list style, and how we can effectively create that sidebar look and feel using the sidebar with view controller initializer of an NSSplitView item in AppKit. Thank you all so very much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.